Well, where you have this great opportunity to speak with you. So if you want to maybe introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your life growing up.
Well, I'm Woody Bradford. I was named Dana C. Bradford III. My father was in the lumber business, and he, of course, was Dana C. Bradford Jr., and so they've had to nickname me. So they nicknamed me Woody for reasons that I think have been basically undisclosed.
Nothing about the lumber business?
Nothing with the lumber business. Actually, I think it was my father was a big fan of big band music, and I think he named me after Woody Herman, actually, who was a clarinet player and had a band of his own in the 40s. I had siblings, two sisters and two brothers, all younger. I was the oldest, and my sisters passed, but my two brothers and sister are alive. My mom and dad are dead, but went to grade school at Harrison Grade School and went to Dundee Grade School and Benson High School.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you're born and raised in Omaha.
I was. Yes, I am born and raised, right.
So what inspired you to go to law school and become a lawyer? Is that something you always wanted to do, or is that some inspiration that came later?
No, as a matter of fact, I graduated from college without knowing what I wanted to do at all. So I had a brief period in the Marine Corps. Well, I can go into the story. I joined the OCS, which was a 3-year commitment. I got to Quantico, Virginia during the Cuban Missile Crisis, which is in 1962. And so they put us through a rapid training mechanism, and at the end of it, you had to fit your physical. So I had my physical, and I had a double hernia. So the Navy surgeon looked at me and said, "Well," or I guess I said to him, "What do I do?" And he said, "Well, you got two choices. We'll fix you up, take care of you, and you'll be ready to go in 6 weeks, or you're out." And I said, I think I'm going to do the out. And I had 3 years of my life back. And so I went back to my college and took what you'd call, I guess, an examination to determine what I was not geared to do, but could do maybe. So they said, you can be in the newspaper business, you can be a troubleshooter, and maybe you can go to law school. So I went into the newspaper business. I went to the Council Bluffs and on Perel, and I trotted down there. I remember with my work that I was not a bad writer in college, so I had work that I could show somebody. And I took it to Lou Gertis. I'll never forget. He was the city editor, and he read it. He says, "Well, I'll tell you, son, I think that if you want to stay in the newspaper business, you got to go out and have some experience, and the World Herald is not about to hire you." So I went across the river, and they hired me, and I was there for about a year. Tremendous experience in that small newspaper. I could go forever and tell stories about the Council Bluffs and on Perel, but then I decided. That I needed to. I was going to try law school, and I was also going to get married. So my father was not happy at all about this. First of all, that I was getting married because I couldn't afford to get married, and second of all, that I was going to law school. But we struggled through. We got married, and we went to the day we were married. We got in a little Falcon station wagon that I had acquired during the summer because I had to quit the non-Perel because they were paying me $57.50 a week, gross. So the idea was that I had to get a job that would at least get me enough money to get to California. So I went to Hawkins Construction Company, and I dug ditches which really drove my father crazy. And got enough money to get a car and go to California. And I went to California because I'd never been to California. And I applied to law school, 2 schools, university in California and 2 here. And I played to UCLA and then the University of California at Berkeley. And I went to the University of California at Berkeley, and that was the end of that story.
And so you came back to Omaha to practice, or did you practice at all? Okay.
No, I came back to Omaha because by that time I had 1 child, or we had 1 child, and 1 on the way. And I just figured, Omaha's always been a good place to raise children, and I'll come back and see if I can get a job.
So where did you start working?
I started working with Monsky, Grudinski, Good & Cohen. The principals of that firm were William Grudinski, who was an elderly man even at that time, Harry B. Cohen, who was a former president of the Nebraska Bar. He was a tax lawyer. Bill Grudinski was pretty much an estate lawyer. And Paul Good was a former Attorney General of the state. He won the famous Wyoming water rights case as an Attorney General. So Monsky had passed on. Henry Monsky was a famous Jewish lawyer who was FDR, a great friend of FDR's. So he spent a lot of time in Washington. And the other guy, Alan Garfinkel, was an associate in the firm at that time, and Warren Zweiback was another associate. And Paul Festerson joined us later. So that was the firm that I was with for about 4 or 5 years.
So what were those first 4 or 5 years like? What was your learning curve? What kind of work did you do?
They taught me how to be a lawyer, and particularly a business lawyer and a tax lawyer. And so for most of that time, I was involved with business and tax matters, estate planning. We represented Boys Town, and we had a lot of large retail clients. Nebraska Clothing, Brandeis were large clients of ours, and they had different matters to handle. But what they allowed me was a freedom of choice to do other things that I might like to do. So I wasn't handicapped in that sense. It was sort of a free-swinging kind of situation financially, because they had a fantastic, when I started, had an unbelievable way of billing their clients. They billed them once a year.
Oh.
They would literally, and they looked down their disbursements and their various matters, and they did it in January after the first of the year, because they wanted to pay their taxes in April. So they got the bill out at the end of January, and their clients paid them by the end of February, and they paid their taxes and split their whatever partner split at that time. And then they paid, I think I went to work for $640 a month, and I had 2 children. So, it's those days probably, they were amazing in that way. So, but they did allow me a lot of freedom to practice, and I took on a number of cases that were pro bono and a number of cases that were risky. For them, it was risky. That's what I always admired about them. I took a couple of cases that were, one was suing the Omaha Public Schools, which was, they didn't say anything, but their teeth clenched. They were the law firm was very, very conservative about the law and the practice of the law. But I can remember I took on a case involving a 17-year-old rapist, and he was known in that time as the 32nd Avenue rapist. And I took on the case, and we got the prosecutor on the other side was Frank Payne, who everybody will remember, that was around, just a wonderful guy. And he saw me as a kid. He looked at me and he said, "Oh, brother, what am I going to do with this guy? He, and he couldn't have been nicer to me, because this was a major felony case, and I had just stepped in. I must have thought I walked on water or something. I don't know what it was, but my ego was got the best of me, or my stupidity, frankly. So much so, though, that I got into it, and they had 7 women that had been raped by this 17-year-old boy. And they only charged him with 1, which I had. And I had to keep the others out from testifying. That was because I was a goner if those women would come in. And there was a law that in place at the time that we found, but I say we because I'm sitting there one night, sort of after 6, and William Grudinsky comes in and asks me. Now, William Grudinsky is well into his 70s and maybe even his early 80s, and he says to me, "What are you doing?" And I tell him, well, he says, you need some help. And he and I stayed up, and we wrote the brief. And the judge, at that time, he sustained us, and the 7 women, they didn't need any 7 women either, so they were not allowed to testify. But that was the kind of firm it was, and William Grudinsky hadn't been in a criminal courtroom or a trial courtroom as long as I was there. Maybe it was when he was a young man, but his father was a rabbi who had a little temple down on right across from what was then Tech High School, the TAC building. It's still there. But you have to. It's sort of you can tell it by its architecture. I don't know what it is now. It's probably boarded up or used for something else. But he was really quite a fellow.
So would you consider Grabowski? What am I saying his name right?
Bill Grudinsky.
Grudinsky, sorry, Grudinsky, to be one of your mentors and someone who shaped the lawyer that you became?
Oh, the two mentors I had there. One was Harry B. Cohen, who was just a phenomenal business lawyer, and Warren Zweiback, who was a young charger at that time, and allowed me to learn the practice of trial law from Warren Zweiback, which was you had to lace your shoes very tight.
Did he have the nickname Speedy?
Speedy was his brother, and his brother is alive, and his brother was a heart surgeon under DeBakey, and his father was Joe Zweiback sold Gerispeed, which was this product that you took, and it made you really active and strong, and he advertised all the wrestling that was on an early television. That's what they had. They had wrestling matches, and then there was Joe with Gerispeed. And but Warren's name was Horsey, and Warren went to Princeton and Columbia Law School, and he was something. He was something, but he taught me a lot.
You've made quite a career of being a general practice attorney.
Right.
We don't really see so much of that anymore. How did you do that? How did you become the jack of all trades?
I made my mind up by basically that experience, which they allowed me to do. But I made my mind up that if a judge like yourself has to get every case that comes her way, and often gets, not the same variety and not the same issues and not the same kinds of cases, but has to know the rules of evidence, has to know the things that make the system work, that I could do that.
I think that's great.
And that's really why I stayed in the general practice.
Keeps you on your toes, doesn't it?
It does. Well, it does that, and it allows you a flexibility and where things are not the same. The only thing you've got that I find it difficult, but I'm not going to change, is that no matter what kind of day I planned, no matter how I was set up, it never worked. Never worked.
Never worked out.
No.
So you're what we call a bar nut. So you have led the OBA, you've led the NSBA as president, served the OBA lawyer referral service. I don't know why I can never say that word. And for about 50 years, and you still come to every event. You do Inns of Court. What is it that this involvement means to you personally, that you keep coming and showing up and being a good leader after all these years?
I think because I enjoy the company, and because there's always something to learn. But some of the best people I know are lawyers, and I've always had a desire to give back to the profession. I remember for a long time I was just struggling along with 4 kids, and then I got to a point where I said, no, I gotta start giving back, and that's how I got started in the bar activities. Bar activities were terrific. I mean, I can still think back on the Barrister Club shows that we did. Frankly, I think they were pretty wild in comparison today, frankly. But we got by with a lot in those days, but it was a smaller bar in many ways. Now we've got many people that are lawyers around us. But I always felt real comfortable with the process. I've enjoyed each of the activities. I will say that I as from the bar presidents, when my term was over, it was over. I didn't really try and get back and say, look over anybody's shoulder, unless I was called. And I was called a few times to come in on issues that involved access to justice. So I got involved in that, and I still am. And so I do get involved in when called upon to try and deal with those problems, and I think that's made it enjoyable also. Yeah.
What advice do you have for younger, newer attorneys that are just starting out in their practice? What is your advice looking back on your career? What would you tell them to do?
I wouldn't tell them to be a general practitioner.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you would want to do that. That's more of a calling than calling for variety, because you want to have a variety of experiences. I would make sure that they wanted that they understood that the practice has changed dramatically since I started. And in one major way, if just look at the litigation side, and that is that if you want to go into litigation, you better go into regulations, because litigation today is really involved with the administrative processes more than anything else. I'll give you. There's so many examples. Let's just take probate. Right now, I would say that the litigation in probate cases is up, let's say from 10 years ago, up 500%. There is so much going on in that area that I've been involved in issues in that area, and I'm amazed at the number of cases that have come up. And I know I've talked to defense counsel, and this is a whole brand new area for them. By insurance defense counsel, they never 10 years ago they never saw these kinds of cases. Well, it's regulations. The regulations have developed. Elder law, is one. But there are other things. Business law, the regulations in business law, tax law. I've defended tax cases. I have a theory about that. I have a theory about the patent law cases I've tried too. So let's explain that. I would never go into to defend a patent law case without a patent lawyer sitting next to me. I mean, I just wouldn't do it. But he's never been in the courtroom. So it works. It's always worked out pretty well. Tax law is the same, although I think tax law is pretty so regulated that you could take it as a trial lawyer. You can take the issue. Wouldn't be any different than, let's say, a personal injury case, right? Really, and I would know that tax lawyers are going to go crazy, but I don't think it's hard from a trial lawyer's point of view to take a case in almost any field, except for me, securities. I wouldn't feel comfortable there. But I guess I think you want to specialize unless you want to be a trial lawyer, and then I think you can expand yourself in various areas of the law, and you can do it easily. So it's not, but there are darn few. You probably know yourself. There are darn few people practicing trial law every day where that's what they do, and all the firms have trial lawyers and so forth, the larger firms and everything, but there's darn few of us. There were a lot more of us before, but there are darn few of us around anymore. And there are trial lawyers that I know that get out of it quickly. They get in it, they are in it for maybe 20 years, and they're so long. Because it's not easy.
So based on all these trials and your practice, what do you think some of the most underappreciated skills are for lawyers? We all know that you have to be able to read, you have to be able to write, you have to be able to communicate, but what are some of those underappreciated skills that lawyers have that you think a good lawyer, it's not just those core skills, but really some of these other underappreciated skills?
I think you have to have passion. I think most trial lawyers have a passion for what they're doing. And then you have to learn when not to, what the limits are of your passions. You have to learn how to be able to control yourself in a courtroom, and you have to be able to do that in a way that the court appreciates and the jury appreciates. There are fewer jury trials right now, and more, as you probably know, more judge trials. And so when you're trying a case to the court, you have to be able to understand that where you are, and it's entirely different, and so you have to become a real officer of the court. Well, you do that with the jury trial too, but you have to. Today we have people, aggressive plaintiffs, okay, and aggressive defendants, a lot more angry, if you will, and they don't like the process when they get in it either. That's the other thing. They don't really like, they may feel that, boy, I want to sue, and I want to get going, and I'll stick with it to the end. Well, 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 2 months in it, they don't want to be in it at all. But I think you have to. I don't know. I think the lawyers that I've seen some great lawyers too in our town that I've thought that have it. You have to have the ability to represent your client in the best professional manner you can muster, and some guys and gals are good at that. And then therefore, and the court knows it, and so that's what I would say. They're lawyers with the best demeanor are the ones that get, even if it doesn't win the case, it creates an atmosphere in the courtroom where everybody can sort of relax. And we have, so that's one area that I think. Besides, preparation and that, I think most everybody realizes the basics. But in the courtroom, you have to remember you're in the courtroom. Lyle Strom used to make sure that I understood that I couldn't go past the bench. I couldn't get out of my chair and go up to he wanted to make sure that I understood that. And Tom Talkin reminded me that I should be on time. I'm notoriously not on time. And but I've cured myself of that because I showed up and I thought I thought I was on time, but I was 2 minutes off. And I walked in and he was a magistrate judge, federal system, and he said, "Mr. Bradford, I see that you're late." And I said, "Well, you're not, Your Honor. I don't think I thought it was. No, you're late. Now I want you to apologize to me first, and then apologize to the counsel for the." Then in this case, I think there were three other lawyers and their clients there, and I had to apologize to every one of them by name. So they're just, but little stories like that where I learned and appreciated that there's a methodology of the courtroom that you have to be able to understand. And I think we've got some great lawyers in this town that do. Yeah.
That decorum.
Yeah.
What has helped you to stay so grounded and to be approachable and be humble these years?
Well, you're nice. I think it's. I basically think it's probably my faith. If you want to, if you're asking me about those factors, I have never felt, and I know this may sound corny, but I've known since I was 11 years old that I wasn't planted on this earth to do anything else but help somebody else. And so I found ways to do that, and I still do. And that's just very straight. I can't say it any, and I have done that, I think, all my life.
What do you see the future of the law practice looking like? I mean, you've talked about how you've seen it change. Can you predict what you expect it to look like in the future?
Well, it probably won't change much from that I see in the near future. I think the education of going to law school, which has already allowed people to do on many other things than practice law, will continue. I think they'll find ways to curriculum and so forth to have a broader curriculum, and so people can have other options. I think that more businesses will hire in-house counsel. I think that it will. I would not be surprised if even small businesses had at least a part-time, or so lawyers will be working for corporate situations. And government, for gosh sakes, is going to hire lawyers, continue to hire lawyers in huge numbers just because of regulations. And there's, I think government is always going to be a big source of job potential. I think the large firm practice is going to suffer long term. Largely because I think we have priced ourselves out of the business in large firms, and even this firm. I'll tell you a story if we have time. But I've always been very, very cautious about fees and what people can afford, and if they can or can't afford. And I've been amazed at the amount of some fees, some of which I got, that were way over the top. And then I watched some coach at Nebraska gets paid $300,000 to have somebody play football. But my point is that I think we're going to price ourselves out of the business of practicing the kind of law that I practice today, and so we are going to institutionalize that practice in some way so people can afford it. I'm not so sure how that'll be, where we'll go to a panel system or where we'll go to where everything's in administrative law. But if we're not careful, people just won't use us. They won't. I mean, look at. I'm an arbitrator for the American Arbitration Association. I like arbitration. Don't misunderstand me, but it's the way it's going to happen. Arbitration is quick, cheap. Mediation, quick, cheap. Those are going to be institutions that are going to continue to flourish. You're going to have alternative resolutions spring up all over to the practice of law, to particularly the trial practice. I see that because we've made it so expensive. You know, I'm amazed at what and I'm in the business. I mean, if you're in a domestic relations case, which I do those too. I mean, if you take a deposition, you're crazy. I mean, because the cost of it, people come in and they want a divorce, but they don't want it to cost $10,000. So you have to, I've stayed away from, and I think a lot of us have taken a deposition in a divorce case because of the cost. Now maybe that's good. Maybe we're becoming more efficient, but I worry about that. I mean, the business community. When I started practice law, the business community, you could not have a dispute decided by anybody but a courtroom, and often a jury. Once went to a seminar where the defense lawyer said that if you were a defense lawyer and you didn't take a case to a jury, it was malpractice.
Oh, wow.
Malpractice. Today, defense lawyers rush to mediation. I know they fought it for a while, but not any longer because the guys with the yellow or green shades on have said, "Yeah, take it here. We can work that out financially." But so I think it's going to change. We're going to be institutionalized, or we're going to lose it. What about? Oh, I did this. We did this great show for in the court on artificial intelligence, where I had to dress up and I was the future. And what I learned was, they're going to put all these facts into a machine. All these facts are going to be in a machine, and they're going to be able to put. The world is going to be all in this database, and so you're trying a lawsuit, and you have 10 facts, you put it in, the other side puts in 10 facts, it just spits out the result. That's artificial intelligence. Now that may not happen for us at some time, but as the population grows, as people want faster decisions and cheaper decisions, there might well be willing to roll the dice.
I remember reading an article in the Nebraska Lawyer, probably 15, almost 20 years ago now, talking about the change in the practice of law, that people have this, people being the clients, have more of a need for instant gratification. So having things like fax machines at the time, email, text messaging, that you're never really out of the office. Have you noticed that type of a change, that people feel like they're in more of a hurry to have an answer?
Absolutely. In fact, I think that's our whole culture. We want we want our pain to end instantly. We want instant gratification. We want everything to be instant. We don't even know the word sacrifice. It's not in our vocabularies, because that we want to be satisfied, not we're in a cultural war with that. I don't want to get too carried away here, but we basically have a culture that is, and then we have as human beings, we are part of our culture. We react to our culture, and then I will maintain we all have a spiritual life. Every one of us. I don't care what religion you are. I don't care whether you're an atheist. You have a spiritual life, and you have this, and you have a cultural life. And this life is, the spiritual side is getting kicked around because people can't find their spiritual life. largely because not because the culture is attractive in some ways. In decision making, you might make a decision that's more of a cultural decision than a spiritual decision, and that's really the what's at issue now in our lifetime. And particularly for people in the United States, we've got everything in real terms. I mean, people that are sitting in the Ukraine, their spiritual life is probably on a pretty high level, because everything of their culture is being destroyed right around them, and everybody they've lost faith in all the cultural side. Well, that's pretty dramatic, but in our society, as you just pointed out, we want everything satisfied now. We want it done. We want people like lawyers that service us to be able to do it quickly and be able to tell us how much it's going to cost, and we want to know where we stand, and it makes, and when you add the technology and the way your client can communicate with you, it's interesting. And I want you to, I don't get on a soapbox like this, with a client. But if I get a chance, I will talk. If they ask, I will tell them about what I think how their case might have a better result if they would think about X, Y, or Z. I don't mean go to church. I mean think about what's the outcome. What is their long-term goal? Where do they see themselves at the end? Quit looking short-term. What is it? Woman with a divorce. I want that woman to be able to have her identity in full recovery, or at least have her ability to have preserved her identity through the process. That's the long-term goal. Well, so that gets you into what I'm talking about. That had nothing to do with the law, except that's the vehicle of how to get there. But so you build those kinds of goals based on more of a spiritual life than you do necessarily a cultural life. In domestic relations, for sure, because you're dealing with children, you're dealing with issues that are long-term, and they are basically asking people to see life differently than, some tricky maneuver that a lawyer might make. And all of us in the in the domestic relations practice know one another, and we all know what we all know what the tricks of the trade are, and who you got to watch out for, and it's part of the deal.
Let's talk about a couple of your war stories. So tell us a story about a case that you've been particularly proud of the result, or something that, if you feel really is the pinnacle of your success as a lawyer. And then conversely, tell us about one that you had to learn a lesson a hard way.
I have to tell you that you always remember the ones you lost, and you very seldom remember the ones you won. The case that I think I was the most proud of was a young man came into my office, and he was a corporal in the United States Marine Corps, and he had been in he had been in Vietnam, and he had signed up for a 2-year commitment, and he wanted out of the Marine Corps, and he'd served Vietnam, and with distinction. There wasn't anything wrong with him, and so he convinced me that he was a conscientious objector, and I said, okay, I'll take your case. And we filed it in the federal district court. Judge Robert Denny was the judge, former congressman, tremendous person. And he was the judge. The prosecutor was Sam Cooper. The Marine Corps hired him on special assignment. He was then a colonel in the Marine Corps and a prosecutor in the Douglas County Prosecutor's Office. And Judge Denny had been in. I'm pretty sure if he wasn't in World War II, he was in Korea. He was also a Marine colonel. And so he had 3 Marines and me, and I was washed out in the Marine Corps, if you remember. Yeah, with a double hernia. And tried this case, and Judge Denny found that he was a conscientious objector, and he walked. That's probably the one I am probably the most proud of, for a number of different reasons. Not only the result, but the client and the lawyers and judge I was in with. It was a tremendous trial. And, just the ones I've lost, God, I think I can tell this story without. I once took a case, a personal injury case, and where my client's actually mother and her husband were driving to Lincoln along Interstate 80. 2 kids who had been on cocaine were driving east on Interstate 80, crossed the median and killed them. Killed my client and her husband. And so I took the case. I thought it was a slam dunk. This was going to be a walk in the park. And but I couldn't get any settlement offer, and my client, frankly, because he was dealing with his mother, was saying to me, "No, I'm not going to accept this. I'm not going to accept this, and I'm not going to accept." We made a number of chances, but he wasn't going to accept anything. So it was a jury case, and I left a person on the jury who was in the insurance business. And I left on because I thought he would really understand what was going on, and I made a huge error. And so I get the case, and I made a couple of errors here. I get an offer from them finally at last, and to settle it for $200,000. And I should have taken the offer, but my client wouldn't take the offer. But I should have. In those days, if you looked at any charts and they said, "What's a life worth?" This lady was 64 years old. I mean, liability wasn't the problem, but certainly damages would be. And he insists that I turn it down, and I don't talk him out of it. And I should have talked him out of it. And Teddy Carlson's the judge. I don't know if you know Theodore Carlson, but anyway, he and I played midget football together. I mean, that's how far back we go. So we've known each other since we were 13 years old. So he looks at me and he says, "Woody, take the dang that money. Don't take it." And I said, "I know." Well, and the other lawyer standing there right with us, and he's just telling him, "Take the money." I can't get him to take it. So we try the case, goes to the jury, and we get $50,000. And so there was a guy. The insurance man, as it turns out, and I was to find out later from another person that was on because I'd left a lawyer on the bench on the jury too, and this lawyer came. I took him to lunch, and he told me that in effect, he argued to the jury that there was no life worth $200,000, and so they started talking about what a life was worth. They got down to $50,000. They gave it to me. So I consider that a loss because I blew it. That was one where I should have talked my client into taking the money, but I should have been smarter about jury selection because I just should have recognized that. But I've had other ones that I can tell another story if you want about it. No, you want another story? Personal injury case. Guys at the it was the Red Lion then, but it's the Houghton, and they had a swimming pool there, and they had a big Pepsi machine next to the swimming pool. And he gets out of the pool, and he goes in and puts his quarter in the Pepsi machine. Unfortunately, the Pepsi machine is hooked up on a line that goes into the plug, but is frayed. Okay, so in fact, a charge comes out of that line, comes up the machine, goes through the machine, and into his penis.
Oh my gosh.
And he becomes impotent, and he's I think he's 32 years old. He's got a wife. He's got 2 kids. They live over in Iowa. And actually, so we had an Iowa lawyer involved. Anyway, we came over, and we were in federal court because they were 2 different states. And we tried the case, and Tom Culhane's on the other side, and we have we're going along, and we have it's a case that is going to. We had to have a sympathetic jury. That's what we had to have. We didn't have a sympathetic jury, that we weren't going to. Who cared? Well, we had a lot of evidence, scientific evidence of his loss of stuffability is what they called it, believe it or not. And so he basically, that was what we had experts in and out, and talking about it, and they're talking about ways that he might overcome it with various devices and everything. And I felt we were going to win the case. I thought, some juror might have come up and said, well, he shouldn't have put his quarter in the machine, but, so actually the hotel got out. Pepsi was the one that was left. So we had as a witness his wife. His wife came in, and we put her on direct examination, and then we put her, and we were talking about loss of consortium and all of it. And then they cross-examined her, and when they got a little aggressive with her, and she didn't get upset. She just sort of began to weep, and I looked over at the jury, and every woman was weeping. $350,000.
I need to again change the tape.
So that's one that I remember distinctly. One because it was such a. I was. Yeah, it was just it's an interesting story, but.
Well, let's kind of circle back a little to some public service. You had a big role in helping bail out legal aid not so long ago. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what motivated you to do that?
Oh, I was president of the Nebraska Bar Association at the time, and legal aid was disenfranchised, I guess is the word, by the corporation in Washington D.C. They told them that they no longer could practice law, and they weren't given very many options. But one of the options that was given them is that if they could make a deal with the Nebraska Bar Association to take over the legal aid. Well, you can imagine the egos in that thing. Seriously, it was. And so I said okay, and I said, well, I first need to meet with some people from the legal aid nationally, and have them tell me that what the mechanics are of this, so that I can take it back to the executive committee and we can look at it and see if that's something we want to do. I was very inclined to do it, so there was no doubt about that, because I felt this was no accident that it happened at this time. So he told me, the wonderful guy, just a fabulous guy. He became a United States Attorney in Seattle. So what we had to do is take over the legal aid, and so you basically you go into the legal aid office here, and you go in the legal aid office in Lincoln, and you find just tremendous people. And they weren't aware really that they had broken some of the rules of they weren't rules of practicing the law. They just was rules of administration. They didn't track things right. They didn't, they took cases that they probably shouldn't have taken. They were finding their way. So we established a plan, and there was difference in Omaha and Lincoln. Oh my. So I had to work that out. They just looked. They looked at things differently, and they had taken some or turned down some cases, and Omaha had taken some cases that maybe those decisions were questionable. But we were able to. We didn't lose anybody. All we did is make sure that they understood that the Bar Association now was basically taking over legal aid, and we were doing it so that we could come up with a plan of access that would allow legal aid to be restored in the state of Nebraska. And we were able to accomplish this through the goodwill of all the lawyers. But it really was not, I think, as hard as it may sound. A lot of egos that were hurt in the process, because when you're a legal aid lawyer, you believe that you're doing the Lord's work, and to have someone come in and say, well, not only that, you're going to stop unless this guy that's running the Bar Association is going to come down and tell you how to do it. So I made sure that I didn't tell anybody to do anything more than they were doing anyway. It's just their organization had to change, and they were cut off from money. So you had to find a way to get them through, so they could have a salary. I mean, and we found ways to do that. And everybody in the Bar Association, I think was glad to be a part of it. We did change a lot of things about how they did things, but it was mostly administrative. And but we left them, with their egos intact, and I think and functioned. But let me talk to you a little about legal aid just a bit. Legal aid today is so much bigger and better than it ever has been, and that there's no mistake about it. The people that are running legal aid are incredible. And Appleseed is huge, and Appleseed came into being, and organizations like that have made the legal community much better. And I think the legislature, I remember, and this is one of the things we had to do. We had to get money from the legislature, and we went down to the legislature, and I think we asked, I can't remember exactly, but it was a lot of money. But we told the legislature that the way we wanted them to pay for it is we wanted a surcharge on every action that occurred in the domestic relations court after the decree. So if you came in and you had to pay $10, $15 as a fee to bring an action post-divorce. And that netted so much money. It's amazing that it paid for what we needed to get everything, legal aid up and running. And today it's still going, and it's a big asset to the legislature itself today. So we got that in, and we also had I forget what we call it now. It's still alive, but it was really that which saw a lot of money going to legal aid and to legal aid causes.
Oh, IOTA?
No, it's I want to accountability. It's not accountability. It's anyway, I was on the committee, so and what we did is we basically we were in charge of all the money that we raised in the legislature, and we could give it to the various legal aid and various things, and that's how they made it.
How long was the state bar kind of guardian over legal aid before it went back in its own?
Once it raised the money, and once it got the legislature to agree on a mechanism how they could in effect fund legal aid, then we were out. Then all these organizations then had their own independent way, and this commission would determine their money, and and they had to go before the commission every year, and then that's morphed into other things. It morphed in, for example, today they're the primary source of capital punishment. They defend those that are charged with murder.
Oh, what is that called? There is another commission on justice or advocacy commission.
Yeah, it's the Commission on Public Advocacy. That's exactly it. Well, that commission was formed to fund legal aid, and then began to fund capital punishment cases, and still does.
Yeah, they still do.
Yes.
I think that's their primary function is they put good lawyers on, people who know their way around a capital punishment case. And I think they employ a couple are on staff, and then they will do some contract type cases, or get lawyers to come in for whatever.
Yeah, the Commission on Public Advocacy. That's right.
That's awesome. So, is there anything else that you want to tell your kingdom here of OBA?
Oh, the only thing I can I think that there are a lot of things I could share, but I can tell you this: if as a young lawyer today, if you are practicing law in Omaha, Nebraska, you're in the best place you can practice law. With all due respect, we've for a number of years we have had a fine judiciary. We've had first-rate lawyers practicing here. And I, in my practice, I see a lot of judges and I see a lot of lawyers. So, I can say we're in a really good position here, as far as offering legal services and for the administration of justice. So it's a very comfortable place to do business. I don't think we've lost any of our passion in many ways, those of us that are practicing in this area. But so I think I think it'd be a great place just to be. So if they are thinking about staying around, that'd be a good. And I think Nebraska probably has a good place to be for lawyers. But I happen to think that also I live in the Memorial Park area, and I always have when I came back. And that neighborhood has always been special to me. And so is Omaha. You get a comfort level regardless of where you are, and so it's a good place to be.
I don't have any questions, Judge. Anything else?
No, we really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. I think this was a neat project that
No, thank you for asking me. Yeah, appreciate it.